Meanwhile, Chrysler had set up a telephone hotline. Operators were given this script. When asked why owners should feel safe, the operators were instructed to say, "There is no defect with the current latch. Owners can best protect themselves by using seatbelts at all times." But seatbelts did not save 9-year-old Brandon Auer. His parents, Donna and Brian, were among minivan owners who say they had no safety concerns after receiving the letter from Chrysler.
They implied there was not really a safety concern, that they were doing it just for the peace of mind of their valued customers. So we didn't think that our family was in danger.
Just last month, more than 5 months after Chrysler insisted its latch was safe, the Auers were driving their 1989 Plymouth Voyager on this Illinois road. Both of their sons, they say, were wearing seatbelts. Alex in the middle seat, Brandon in the rear. A car ran a stop sign and slammed into the van, propelling it into this cornfield.
Donna yelled for me to get Brandon, and she would get Alex. And I turned around and looked, and my gate is open, and my rear seat is gone. And I yelled, "Oh my God, Brandon's gone."
Brandon was ejected. His mother found him at least 58 feet from the van. He was still buckled into his seat.
He was slumped over in his seat, and I undid his seat belt, and there were 2 people there already, and we laid him down on the ground, and they started CPR on him immediately.
But it didn't do any good.
A coroner's jury concluded Brandon was killed because he was ejected due to the failure of the van's latches. This summer in Dallas, David Abercrombie says he asked his local Chrysler dealer about the new latch.
I said, "When are they going to replace the latch?" They said they haven't manufactured them yet, and really it's not that big a problem.
Safe to drive was your
Safe
impression.
to drive, yeah. And if it wasn't, why would they let me go?
Abercrombie set out on a long trip with his fiancée, Lynn Jones, and her family. It was this past July, nearly 4 months after Chrysler announced the offer to replace the latch.
You see the skid mark?
In the New Mexico desert, Lynn, who was driving, lost control of the van. Police say the rear struck this guardrail and the van rolled over. 5 passengers who were not wearing seatbelts were ejected, including Lynn's son, Mark.
I remember just being shot straight out the back of the van. I was just immediately thrown onto the pavement and skidded about 15 feet, 20 feet.
Lynn's sister, according to police, was ejected too. She lost an arm. Her mother, who was also ejected, was killed. Abercrombie, his fiancée, and her family are suing Chrysler.
Well, I believe that this latch is unsafe. It's a threat to the public.
Joan Claybrook is president of Public Citizen, a consumer advocacy group. She once headed the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, the same agency at the Department of Transportation that permitted Chrysler to conduct a less urgent service action instead of a safety recall.
The Department of Transportation allowed this to happen. All of this delay and dilly-dally and letters that deny that there's a safety hazard and hotlines that deny there's a safety problem are examples of what happens when you make the first mistake in the very beginning, which is to allow Chrysler to call the shots.
Last month, NHTSA suddenly spoke out. In an angry letter about the script operators used on the Chrysler telephone hotline, an official wrote, "NHTSA is very troubled by the tone and substance of the script. We are disturbed by the prospect that numerous minivan owners are being led into a false sense of security about the safety of their minivan latches." As far back as 1990, according to this internal company memo, Chrysler managers considered strengthening the rear door latch. The manager who wrote the memo estimated a stronger latch would cost 25 to 50 cents each, but he felt the weaker latch was not a significant problem and recommended keeping it unless mandated by the government to change it. And Paul Sheridan, who ran Chrysler's minivan safety team, says he urged Chrysler not only to develop a stronger latch, but to add a backup latch.
During early 1993, for example, I made a presentation recommending that the current latch be upgraded to what we call a dual-stage latch.
And even though every competing minivan, like this one, had a dual-stage latch, Sheridan says Chrysler did not want it.
I was told that to upgrade the latch, especially in terms of its design philosophy, in terms of going from a single to a dual. To make that drastic a change on the latch would indict all the previous latches. You effectively are admitting to guilt. That's what I was basically told. And so it was on that basis that the safety leadership team recommendation to upgrade to a dual-stage latch was rejected.
Chrysler turned down our request for an interview. The company has stated that it spent millions of dollars on safety features, but did not think upgrading the latch would increase safety. Sheridan says that last year, Chrysler disbanded his safety team after company officials repeatedly objected to his recommendations.
I began to recognize that anything negative associated with safety, anything negative at all, was to be quieted and hushed.
Chrysler fired Sheridan and is suing him for defamation and for allegedly disclosing confidential information. In court papers, the company claims because Sheridan is not an engineer, he was not qualified to make safety engineering suggestions or decisions. Sheridan denies Chrysler's charges and is suing the company. After all this, the question remains, is the latch safe? Just this week, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration closed its 2-year investigation by concluding it is not safe enough.
The safety of millions of minivan owners and their families is at stake here. This latch needs to be stronger and safer.
In a prepared statement to the press after NHTSA's announcement, Chrysler continued to insist its minivan is safe.
Minivans as a category are among the safest vehicles on the road, and Chrysler's minivans are among the safest of all minivans anywhere. And we're going to stand behind the safety of these vehicles.
But how can the government claim a latch is not safe enough and yet not order an urgent safety recall? According to Joan Claybrook, Chrysler got off easy.
They're trying to get the best of both worlds, not admit any liability, not admit they made a mistake, not admit that there's a safety hazard, not really alert the public, but at the same time do lots of communication to try and show that the company is concerned about the peace of mind, as they say in their letter.
Chrysler, which has begun to install the new, stronger latches, now says it will step up its efforts. Still, the company admits that it could take more than a year to complete the process.
Chrysler says they are fixing the latches.
Well, not fast enough.
Not fast enough when people are dying. If our son had stayed inside the van, there's no doubt he would have walked away from the accident just like the rest of us did. So how can they say there's not a problem?
James, if the government has determined that these latches are not safe enough, why hasn't it ordered a recall?
Well, the government says that Chrysler could fight a recall in court, delaying production of the stronger latches, and that with this agreement, the stronger latches are being installed. But I must tell you that we called around to some dealerships today which did not have them.
Now, what are the owners of these minivans and their passengers supposed to do?
Well, first of all, if you have a 95, 96 model minivan, no problem, they've got the stronger latches. If you have the older minivans, the suggestion is this: wear a seat belts at all times. Double check that rear seat to make sure it's properly installed. And finally, even though the number of ejections is statistically rare, perhaps maybe you shouldn't use that last seat.
Yeah. There may be statistical rarity, but if it happens to you, it's 100%, and that's rough. Thank you, James.